Hey, it's Justin with Seaboard Marine. In this video, we're going to introduce you to a new member of the Seaboard team, Tim Von Rader. He's our resident hydraulics expert, and he put together all the hydraulic systems for the Lobster boat. So in this video, we're going to test the hydraulics, show you a few of the issues we had along the way, and show you how we moved the boat from its old location, which was under this metal cover here. We moved it out in the open so we could start working on the mast and do the final hydraulics test. And pretty soon this thing will be heading down to the ocean for sea trial. Big day?
Yeah, big trouble day, I feel.
Big trouble day? What do you think, Tim?
So what we're doing right now is I need to make sure that the pump has fluid in the body of it. So I'm pulling the case drain line off, and I want to pre-fill the pump with oil before we initially start it up. If I have to, we have a little oil here, we'll pour it into the pump and then at least give it a little initial lubrication when we fire it off.
So does that make you happy that you saw a little oil come out that?
Yeah, what that means is we've got oil up to that point. So we have a little head pressure from the tank. The tank is slightly higher than the pump. So this morning we're going to make a hose for Andre's boat. This is his main pressure line off of his manifold to his pump. It's a 3/4 inch high pressure hose. This one needs to be 13 feet long. A couple of tries at it here. These are going to add some length to it, so if I subtract this distance, it'll put me right at his 13-foot mark. It'll be at a WD-40.
This is the last one. Pressure hose would feed every device.
Okay.
And
so that's the pressure hose?
pressure hose.
And this is the one we just made up in the... We just crimped the end on in the shop?
Yep.
Checking everything for leaks. I saw that, a little squirt. Oh no.
I didn't see the level of the oil in the tank. Probably it's full.
How's that taste?
Good.
So what we've got is a pressure flow compensated piston pump that's driven off the transmission of this engine on Andre's boat. Coming off the pump we have 4 lines: suction line, signal line, case drain line, and pressure line. Our pressure line comes over to our pressure manifold, which sends fluid in all the different directions on the boat where we need it. So a couple of these you'll see that go over, back over, across, are going to the gear that's on the back of the boat. We have a net reel and we have a stern roller. One of these lines goes forward and it feeds his pinch puller and anchor winch system. This system right here feeds his high pressure water pump. So it's very similar to like the pressure washer pumps you'd see at the 25-cent car wash. What that's for is that's going to clean off his ropes and his traps when they get cruddy. So we have a flow control valve here that's going to set the overall maximum speed of the motor on his water pump. On and off valve, solenoid actuated.
Oh, okay, so that's going to be a flip of the switch kind of thing.
Right. Everything else has got manual directional control valves on it. This is the only item that has a electric type on and off control. So all the little blue lines you see are signal lines.
And the signal lines are to set the swash plate
Yeah, what it
displacement?
does, it picks up a pressure differential across a restriction. And what that does is it tells the pump basically how hard to work.
And these guys are just coolers for the hydraulic fluid?
One of them is a cooler for the hydraulics, and I'm not sure what the other one is
Steering.
cooling. Steering. Okay.
Power steering?
We have provisions for regulating the volume of oil that goes through that cooler so that we don't put the full system volume through it. We can only meter a small amount of the cooling, but it's continuously cycling through that. Now we're on the deck of his boat. What he has got is a pinch puller. This is the control lever for that. You can see that this is a rotary style lever. So it's variable in its volume that it feeds the motor that drives the pinch puller. So we can run it very slow, or we can run it wide open, or we can put it to neutral, or we can run it backwards. So this net reel is going to pull whatever nets that he's using to fish for whatever type of species he's going after. So one of these valves controls the net reel. One of these valves controls the stern roller. A level line that's built into it. So what happens is the fluid drives the reel, the exhaust fluid from the motor drives the level line. So you can see the tubing coming out of here, running across and going to the other side and going to this motor. Now this motor is what's driving the net reel. Now kinematics are pretty crafty as far as their fabrication skills. And on this net reel, they have a valve system they've set up that does a forward and reversing on this motor.
So when it hits one extreme, it basically...
When this comes over, it bumps into that. When it bumps into that, it directs the fluid in the opposite ports of the motor, and off the thing goes in this direction. When it gets over to this side, it bumps into this, and it switches rotation.
So you can set these limits with a set screw there?
Another kinematics product. So what this anchor winch does is it pulls his anchor forward. You can drive his anchor forward, you can drive his anchor reverse, and then he can also lock it into what's called a float mode, which allows the spool to coast. And the reason they do that on anchor winches is if the system or the engine died, you can still get the anchor off the boat.
So you could drop anchor in an emergency.
Right, so if you're heading for the rocks, you dump the anchor.
And you can still lock it too.
You can lock it or you can cleat it off. Over here we have a return manifold. So our return manifold does just the opposite of the pressure. It takes all of the return circuits and it drives them through this manifold and then back up into our tank. And we can regulate our return back pressure here and put some of it through the heat exchanger and some of it back up through this hose. Some of the things that we tried to accomplish on this boat was minimizing the amount of hose that we ran. So we bent up a bunch of stainless steel tubing. These three tubes right here are driving the anchor winch. So if you follow these forward,
So rather than this all just being hose,
right,
it's all hard tubing
it's all hard tubing.
to the bulkhead and up to the anchor winch.
We come across the engine room to this deck plate.
And it goes all the way up to here. You can see the terminations right there. And what kind of tubing is that?
The main pressure return is 3/4 inch 065 304 stainless. The signal line is 1/4 inch 028 304 stainless.
The seamless hydraulic spec tubing.
Right. And then we have some 1/2 inch in the cabin, and that's 049, so it's 1/2 inch 049 304 stainless.
So just as we were finishing up the initial hydraulic tests, it came time to move the boat out into the yard so that Andre could finish erecting the mast and we could finish the final welding on the stanchions or stays. The initial test went well, but we did have a few leaks to chase down and the anchor roller was moving a little too fast. The only other issue was the pump seemed to be loading the engine excessively when all the valves were closed. Turned out to be an easy fix that Tim will explain in a few moments. Okay, so what you're saying is the pressure sensing line, once it got pressurized, it just stayed pressurized,
Right.
and there was nowhere for the...
All right, it trapped that pressure, it couldn't bleed it back through the compensator. This particular manufacturer of pumps doesn't have a bleed-off circuit on their compensator. Usually what happens is it very slowly bleeds off. So what you'll notice is you'll operate a function, you'll go to stop that function, the pressure gauge will stay up, but it'll very, very slowly bleed off down to the standby pressure.
Okay.
We weren't getting that. It was staying at the high pressure. So
What brand of pump is this?
this is an Eaton pump,
An Eaton pump?
right? It's manufactured by Vickers, who were purchased by Eaton.
Okay. And so since it didn't have an internal bleed off,
We put an external bleed off.
Yeah.
So let me show you what that looks like. That's this valve right here.
Okay.
So what this does is this adjustment right here is my pressure compensated flow control. And what I did was I just barely cracked this. This is connected to my signal line. This is connected to my drain line. And what it does is any oil that's trapped in this signal line, it bleeds it out this circuit. If you open this any more than just a slight amount, you lose the ability for the pump to pick up a signal.
Right.
And the pump just goes flat. It just stays in the standby mode,
Even when you try to run something.
even when you try to run something. So there's a little bit of an adjustment to get it correct, but once you get it correct, I'll show you how it works. We're at about 200 psi standby pressure.
Yeah, before it was all the way up.
Before it was about 1,000.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's run this. And you can see the pressure on the gauge came up slightly. Now the reason it's not higher is because there's no load on this.
Right.
It's just free spinning. But watch when I put it back to neutral.
Good.
Gauge drives drop right back down to the standby pressure. So let's put a load on it. We've got a dog system here on the drum, so I can physically lock this motor from spinning. So this is set in one direction to stop.
So you're fighting against the dog? Okay. So he's. Oh yeah. I got it almost a little under 2,000.
So that's my high pressure setting on the pump right now, is a little under 2,000 psi.
Okay.
Now that's a adjustment that we can make once the boat's in the water and doing what it's supposed to do, and Andre can tell me, you know, the net drum is pulling hard enough or it's not pulling hard enough, we can increase that pressure, or we can decrease that pressure. But a couple thousand psi is a good starting point for that. The anchor winch was actually too fast, so we put an inline flow control on the end. Now I can make it go faster by opening that flow control valve.
So it's totally adjustable.
It's totally adjustable.
Cool. All right, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Pretty soon we'll be doing the sea trial on this boat.